by our guests, our panelists, and tonight we could even call it a different people's court. It is quite a baraza if you look at our set and how we are going to have this conversation, because it involves all of us. A nation of borrowers is what we are calling it. Tonight we dissect Mwananchi's debt distress, and in the introduction you did hear from my colleagues Victor Muyakane and Linda Alela of the options that Kenyans have resulted into and what especially is going on in the country. I will introduce the panelists to my left, and then I'll leave Linda and Victor to introduce the rest of the panelists. Right here next to me is Nyangi John Juma, a senior manager at PFM, Public Finance Management. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. It's good to have you. Sam Omukoko, founder and group managing director, Metropole Corporation. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
And
for having me.
You can use the mic.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. And you are the guys that inform us about the status of
Credit status
of
borrowers.
The famous CRB.
Yes.
Indeed. You shall be getting to hear whether that, how the waiver is happening and whether Kenyans have been enlisted back. Quite some interesting conversation that we're going to have tonight. And Victor did tell you that the value of the 1,000 shilling has now reduced to 850 Kenya shillings. We'll also be dissecting that and what especially it means. Also, are you comfortable with the interest rates that you're seeing? I mean, do you even understand why they are imposed? Do you have a position, or are you even entitled to petition or even request for a less interest rate if you are uncomfortable? That conversation is coming your way at Muyakane, at Linda _Alela, at George Maringa _ at TV47 News is where you can find us on X, formerly Twitter. 22047 is our SMS line. Start with your name, where you're watching us from, followed by your question, comment, or feedback regarding the very important money conversation tonight. Victor and Linda, over to you.
Right, indeed. And the other people that are joining us, incidentally, they're very close to you. We have Madam Lynette Muteshi. Karibu sana.
Asante.
I understand you're the spokesperson of the Shumungo Association.
Yes.
Karibu sana. Next to you is, of course, our very own Mr. Willie Dennis Njiru. Mr. Willie Njiru is an award-winning reporter attached to TV47, the home of untold stories. Now the hunter is now the hunted. Usually behind the camera, now you're in front of the camera.
Absolutely.
Good
Amazing.
to see you. Let's see how it goes.
Home.
But he's coming here, of course, in a different capacity.
Absolutely.
And last but not least is Mr. Brown Shalwa. Karibu sana. You wear many hats. Among them, you are a player in the transport industry, but you're also a youth leader and politician in your own right. Karibu sana.
Thank you, thank you.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the subject. This is what we're talking about tonight. I think, Linda, one of the first questions we need to ask is exactly how we found ourselves here. Picture this. The figures that we gave earlier about the value of the 1,000 shilling coin, that was at October last year. The actual value of it, or what it was able to purchase, is, it's down to about 850 bob. It varies every now and then. They say it is because of the rise in inflation rate. They say it's the depreciation of the shilling. They say it's a bunch of other things. Perhaps, Mr. JJ, you can help us break it down. Exactly why is our money not lasting as long as it used to? And why are we finding ourselves in this position where we're having to borrow not for investment, but borrowing for consumption, for day-to-day needs, for short-term needs? Why are we in this position?
Thank you, Victor. There's an animal called cost of living. The cost of living means that when it increases, the cost of essential commodities that households, individuals, you and me, and Linda here use every day, means that the costs, the prices increases, like transport, food, electricity, and all that. So when they increase, then the amount of money you're spending on them means will get you less units. For example, if a token of electricity was costing 15 shillings, and now it increases to 20 shillings. So it means 100 shillings, which would buy you like 5 units, now it will buy you less. It will buy you less units. if you would pay 50 shillings from bus transport to town, and now it has increased to 70 shillings, which means the money that you spend to go to town for work and come back, then you cannot make the 2 trips. So you have to make less trips, or you have to add more money. So then when that increases, and you find that the income that the people are getting, the salaries, the wages, is not increasing faster than the rate at which the cost of commodities they're spending on is increasing, then people find themselves with very little income. And what is the solution? You try to find how you can borrow money to do what? To survive for the day. And that also shows that the difficult economic times, when you see such kind of things happening, it tells you that the economy is not doing very well.
Mm-hmm. But the challenge, if I may just follow up here, Linda, just a second. The thing is, this gap that has presented itself in month 1, let's picture the first month where the 100 bob is not serving you to and fro to town, for example. If there's a shortage, if there's a gap here, if there's an increase in all these other things, and month 1 there was a gap and you had to fill that gap using borrowing, it means you're starting month 2 with with a handicap, with a deficit, and the situation hasn't changed. If anything, the situation gets worse. So then somebody has to borrow again and borrow again. Talk to us about what sort of predicament that people find themselves in if you get into this sort of cycle.
So that becomes a cycle. If you have to borrow for consumption. See, when you borrow, and you're not borrowing to grow the business. So find that the Kenyans and the wananchi who are borrowing, they're not borrowing that money to invest so that it can grow. So that when you go into month 2, the money you borrowed, you invested it, it has grown, and you have some profit, so that when you repay the loan, then you have some money left. So then you're borrowing to consume. You go into month 3, maybe the lender who lent you in month 2 will not be able to lend you, you shift to another lender in the 4th month. Then in the 5th month, you again go to the lender 4, and then you exhaust the options that you can borrow. You can service the first loan, service the second loan, and the third loan, you are caught up. You don't have enough income to service that. Then now you default. When you default, then you're likely to find yourself in CRB. And after that, then you are not able to do what? To get the next loan. So the principle of borrowing in good practice is that you borrow to invest. You don't borrow to consume. So when you borrow to invest, you look at what we call the cost of borrowing versus the return on investment. Because the money you borrow, you have to repay it, and you don't repay the exact amount that you borrowed. You borrow the money, you repay the money you borrowed, together with some interest rates. So it means that where you put the money, you have to make more money, so that as you repay the loan, you have some money left to keep you going. But if we breach that principle and borrow not for investment and borrow for consumption, you find that even in the large scale, in the economy, we will have to see an economy shrinking, because money being consumed and not invested is like plugging a hole instead of building something new. Then we will have that the entire economy shrinking, and everybody, it becomes now a multiply effect. You will, because this person is not able to repay the loan, you want to borrow, the banks have less money to lend, because their money is with the people, and the people have not been able to repay.
And are not able to pay.
Yeah.
If I may, and I think right at that point where people begin to find it hard to access credit is where a name comes up. 3 initials, CRB. It begins to have a significance there. And good thing we have Mr. Omukoko here, one of the founders, actually a founder at Metropole, and group managing director of Metropole. You're active in Kenya and Uganda as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Talk to us about this. Talk to us just about, maybe define for us what exactly a CRB does. People think you're actually, you're related to the devil. You're stopping us from getting more money. Talk to us, Mr. Omukoko.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. What I can say is that the situation that you have just described, where a person is constrained in terms of purchasing power. So the 100 was able to cater for transport this month, but next month, because it was not the purchasing power dropped, so they have to fill the gap by borrowing. The following month, they will also fill the gap by borrowing. So you find that progressively, one is now beginning to build a debt that is coming into their lives. And what we say is that a CRB is an organization that collects data about people's borrowings from banks, from microfinance institutions, from SACCOs. So a CRB creates a profile of the loans that you have taken. It's an information profile. The account itself is with the lender, but the CRB only keeps the information that the lender is generating on your account. So it's a mirror, but not for money, but it reflects the information that is happening on your loan account. So today in this country, the CRB has undergone a tremendous transformation. When it started in 2010, the CRB had been set there to reflect the profiles of people who had defaulted. And it was guided by the regulations 2008. At that time, the challenge was that most banks were collapsing, and there were specific people who were moving from one bank to another, taking loans, but nobody knew what they were doing. So what the CRB did was that it reflected that information in their database, and now a lender could come and see and say, oh, I can see you had taken a loan from Bank A, you did not pay. Now you have taken another one from Bank B, you did not pay. Now you want a loan from here. I'm sorry, I cannot give you this loan until you deal with the ones you had taken from Bank A and Bank B. So that's how the CRB started. So it then became a deterrent for people to take money from one institution, not pay, and walk to another one to take money. Because the challenge with that is that because banks are losing money to people who are not repaying, they hike the interest rate in order to recover from the good ones that are paying. So you find a good borrower is being punished because of a bad borrower. But things moved on. When these people had been cleared from the borrowing community, the CRB moved to the next stage to be able to say, how do we help people who do not have title deeds to get access to money? Today, not many people have title deeds. So the regulations were changed to say, let us now build their credit history so that all information about their borrowing comes to the CRB. Then the CRB now would reflect a profile of the loans that you have taken and how you are repaying. That profile becomes what we call a credit history. Now, lenders started using the credit history to say, I can see from your profile, you borrow and pay. I am willing to give you more money based on your record. So the issue of you now being in the bureau because you are a defaulter, we moved from that to say you are now in the bureau to see what kind of borrowing behavior you have. If you are of a good borrowing character, banks will lend to you without asking you for a title deed. And indeed, what happened is that it is the one that gave rise to the mobile platforms that you see today. Because now, the mobile lenders only use your credit profile to give you money. So they do not want you to walk to them. They don't know who you are. They don't know where you are. But as long as you have your credit profile with the CRB, they will use that profile to lend to you money as long as you are going to repay. Then again, over time, the CRB moved another step again, because now that most people are able to borrow, because with information being shared amongst lenders and the bank being able to see most people's profile, banks became comfortable in giving out money. So money became very easy. Today, people borrow, and you will never get a physical interaction with that institution, because the guy who is standing behind is the CRB carrying your profile and telling people, this is who you are, this is how you behave when you borrow. Where we have moved today is that the cost of money has become expensive. And that information now, the central bank has said, let us stop denying people credit because they have a poor credit history. Let us allow them to borrow, but those who have a poor credit history could pay a slightly higher interest than those who have a good credit history. So today, most people, even if you have a default item, but it's not too bad, you will still get money, except that now, if your credit history is poor, you will pay a higher price. If it is very good, you will pay a very low price. And that is now being measured by a credit score. Mm-hmm. So today in this country, every borrower who has a credit profile has a credit score. You all need to see that to actually go to the bureau and ask for your credit score, and you'll be given the credit score. So when you go to the bank A, can use your credit score to give you 14%. Bank B, according to their scale, may give you 15%. Another bank may give you 13% based on that credit score.
Interesting.
So we have now reached a place whereby a customer's risk profile determines the price at which they borrow from lenders in this market.
Speak to most of the Kenyans who perhaps could be worried at some point in time. They have defaulted and they have been blacklisted. Would you say that there's no one who's blacklisted by the CRB today, completely?
Okay, I know, and this goes back to how actually the mechanism started in the country, because we started with only default information. Mm-hmm. So it was given a name, a blacklist. Mm-hmm. So because if a lender found you on the bureau, then they knew you're a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And that's how it was. But you can see it changed. So you are in the bureau because you have borrowed, and we're helping you to build a credit history. Mm-hmm. Credit history becomes your collateral. Mm-hmm. Now, today, we're saying we want to use that history to calculate a credit score to price your money. Mm-hmm. So it is now a question of your status changing from a low score to a high score. Yeah. The use of the word blacklist has actually lost meaning in the current environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's interesting. Banks, Shylocks, SACCOs, credit entities, mobile lenders, short-term, creditors, all of these people. And because our main focus is on just how much Kenyans are borrowing for survival, my question then would be, and I have talked to the people who've been there before us, and they said there's not a single time that the economy looked fairly reasonable. Perhaps, well, you would probably want to talk about the Kibaki times, but then I say it's because maybe it was easy to access all these loans. Is it because we have made it extra simple in that someone knows that, well, after all said and done, I can always get to the mobile and get this money, that sometimes we find ourselves feeling comfortable to proceed and borrow? If the times were as tough and as difficult for someone to access a loan like they were back then, would we be at this status where we're talking about people borrowing for survival as opposed to people borrowing for investment? So before we cross over to the other side.
And that's an interesting question. It's a combination of the economic environment in which we live as Kenyans and also our personal behavior as Kenyans, that we have an opportunity. An opportunity has been created for us to access loans easily on the mobile platforms. And like in everything, you will find, however good it is, there is some element of abuse. Yeah? Either out of not understanding what it is, or what we describe as a moral hazard. The people who would want to take a loan without the intention of wanting to pay back. Right. So those two things will be there. So I agree that, yes, access to credit in Kenya has almost reached over 96%. Because if you have an M-Pesa account, if you have basically it means you already have a bank account. You have access to money. So you can access that money anytime. And because of your record with the Bureau, it is even easier. So what I can say is that the challenge that we are seeing is both a combination of the economic status, because if the purchasing power of money is reducing, incomes are not going up, investments are not happening, and people still want to live a certain standard of life, you find that they are supporting themselves by extra borrowing. And because the money is easy, today average, you find that an average Kenyan has about, I would say about 8 accounts, average, meaning I have seen people with 15 mobile accounts. I've seen people with even 20. That means they have taken monies across. In fact, the behavior we see that once you have gotten into the debt trap, then you use one mobile loan to pay another one. But as you're doing that, because they attract interest, the debt begins to balloon. So you find you're actually in a debt trap. How do you come out of it if your income is not changing? Then all of a sudden you find that somebody's life has become terrible because of that debt trap.
Fair enough. George, we have like a minute or so. Maybe just to loop in one of your guests. I am here with...
Actually,
Stakabadhi. Should I call them Stakabadhi?
this looks quite
this looks quite
juicy.
interesting and juicy.
What I'm thinking is, why don't we take a short break?
A quick one.
And when we come
back,
we can give this matter the right attention that it deserves.
After this break.
Big stamp.
Eh? They have stamps, yeah.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Indeed, you're watching the People's Court, or the People's Baraza tonight, as we call it, as we coin it rather, on matters the borrowing nation. And even as we look at, your feedback, 22047 is our SMS line. I'm already seeing a question here. We shall be able to forward that. It's coming to wonderful gentleman from Metropole. But even as we invite your feedback as well on X, formerly Twitter, at TV47 News, at Muyakane, at Linda_Alela, at George Marenga_. Our WhatsApp number will be on your screens shortly, as well as the call-in line. You can go ahead and pose your questions to our wonderful panelists tonight. From the left, we now move to the right, and we want to involve the lady in the panel tonight, especially on matters, Shimungo Organization Group is where she comes from. That is Lynette Muteshi. When you look, you represent the population or the demographic that usually looks at matters home. Talk to us about the dynamics, because the men here will think grandiose, and even in government, the men in government will think expressway, but the women will think water in homes, education, milk for children. Talk to us about when Kenyans are borrowing, or when you're seeing women borrowing, especially even from your group and other areas, what are they borrowing especially to deal with?
Asante sana. Nashukuru.
Karibu.
Shimungo ni kitu kama ni chama. Na vile ni chama, na ni chama ya familia. Na ukiwa umejiunga katika hii chama, wakati wa kukopa, saa ile ukiwa unafanya biashara, si eti ni ya nyumbani tu ukiwa na shida ama maziwa manini, hapana. Ni chama ambayo tumeunga, inasaidia wamama ukitaka kufanya kitu kama biashara. Kama unataka kuuza nyanya, unataka kuuza vitunguu, unataka kuuza mboga, ndiposa ujiendeleze. Sababu hutaenda kwa bank. Kama umeenda kwa bank umekopa, lakini haujamaliza kulipa, hiyo washa kublock. Hakuna vile utaenda kukopa kule kwa bank tena na hujamaliza kulipa ile deni. Lakini ukiwa wewe ni member wa hii Shimungo, utakuja ukope, unajua wewe ni member. Kuna interest na kuna savings zenye una save kila mwezi. Sasa hizo savings zako ndizo zinakusaidia. Sababu saa ile unapewa hiyo pesa, unaenda unafanya biashara, umenunua tuseme kama ni nyanya, utajikaza nayo. Kisha jikaza nayo, utauza ukilipa ile deni. Mpaka uweke bidii kufanya nini? Ya kumaliza. Ndiposa tumeita Shimungo.
Interest rate yenu ni kama ngapi hivi?
Interest,
mtu akichukua pesa.
Yani ile pesa tunatoa kwa monthly, una make sure unatoa 250 per month.
250 bob.
Saving yenye una save kila mwezi. Sasa hii saving yako ndio una make sure inakusaidia. Hiyo 250 ukikopa kama 5000, utaweka bidii uende uweke nyanya ama kitunguu. Ukishauza hiyo kitunguu, una make sure unalipa hiyo deni. Na at least hiyo sio ile ya interest kubwa. Ni interest kidogo, percent yao ni kidogo sana. Iko chini kabisa. Iko chini. Sasa at least ndio tuliita Shimungo. Ndio at least tuna include watu. Wamama wasikae idle, watu wa familia wasikae idle. At least ukiingia kwa hii chama, una make sure kila mwezi una save. Kila mwezi una save. Sasa ukitaka kuweka kitu kama biashara, unakuja unawaelezea, ukishawaelezea watakukopesha pesa. Na ukikuja lazima utaongelesha mmoja wenu ama wawili, watasimama na wewe. Wakisimama na wewe watakuwa kama next of king. At least hii pesa ikikulemea, tutaambia hao walipe. Wakishalipa hizi pesa, wewe utangangana uwalipe baadaye, lakini washafanya nini? Washa cover hii deni, kwa sababu yule mwingine pia anataka kukopa, yule mwingine pia anataka kukopa, na wewe ulikopa na hujamaliza kulipa. Sasa ni wewe uweke bidii na biashara yako. Ukishaweka bidii, hiyo deni kishalipwa na ule mwingine anakopeshwa. Ndipo sasa tuliita Shimungo.
Yes. Okay, na hii nimeona 250 ukisave kwa mwaka ni kama 3000. Ni minimum ama unaweza ongezea? Unaweza
ongezea.
250 ndio minimum.
Ni minimum tu, ni hapo tulianzia.
Okay.
Sasa hapo venye tumeanzia hapo, tukiona watu wakishainuka, tunaweza ongeza ikuwe kama 500 per month.
Per month.
Yes.
Na hii pesa wamama members wanaitoanga, wanaiweka immediately ama kuna ile wanaweka lipa pole pole na inakuanga aje?
Hii pesa wakishatoa immediately wanaenda wanaweka. Ndiposa at least isikae kwa mikono yangu, nijipata nimetumia na ni pesa ya wenyewe ya chama. nitakuwa nimejiletea shida.
Okay.
Sasa ikitolewa hivyo hiyo siku mkishamaliza chama inaenda inawekwa kwa sababu chama ni once per month.
Indeed. Tutarudi kwako tena, but we have a phone call from Mombasa. Njoka, thank you so much for watching The People's Court tonight. Good evening, how are you? Your question, comment or feedback?
Once you borrowed money from the bank and you are given them a collateral ratio of a property, and this property maybe you are borrowed to pay within 5 years, and they give you and you pay 3 years and you are remaining with 3 years.
Yes.
They decide to dispose their property to recover their money.
Yes.
What happens to them once they dispose your property and you had already paid their principal? Let's say you had borrowed 20 million. You paid until you reached to around 10 million. So you have a balance of 10.
Yes.
So before they dispose your property, they accrue the interest. So once they dispose the property, they get their principal, but the interest still remains. What happens to this case?
Yeah, I'm sure, Nyangi, you've gotten the question?
Yes.
I think we can get it. We can come later, start to involve our other panelists, and then you'll be able to address that. Thank you so much. Asante sana. Endelea kutizama. We'll be getting your answers in a bit. Willie Dennis, you have, been as a regular Kenyan, of course, but I know who represent also the journalists. The borrowing issue is one that you've been able to experience. How was it for you?
Over time, not so fair. Because absolutely, every time one gets to borrowing, first you have to put your arithmetics down and ensure that you have a viable mode of repayment. And the caution that bears with it, that you have to have the capacity to be able to clear the loan. And how do you do that? With all the other responsibilities that is taking care of your family, which also have to be included. Fair enough, in my early life, I actually borrowed around 25,000, maybe around 25 years ago. And actually, unlike our guests there, I did allude to the fact that and Linda also, borrowing is not a yesterday's thing. This country has borrowed ever since it was called a republic. Borrowing is not a bad concept, but it is meant to bring forth growth. Any repayment is actually an uphill task because you are not able to get there. But since you want to get there, you engage an uphill gear, which is called a loan. Which now will be able to rise your position or maybe business from where you are to somewhere else better other than where you are. And while you borrowed, you are not able to go up. It's like just asking somebody to lift you up. Of course, whoever lifts you up has to bear some weight. And you have to make yourself, in quotes, lighter for you to be portable, to be lifted. So apparently, this somebody who comes to lift you up financially expects you within such a time which maybe you are not able to raise maybe 100,000 within this time, but somebody here has come in to give you 100,000, which you have to raise maybe within a certain time. Remember, this money has other affiliated things in it, like we have the insurance, we have they have their own things they do inside that includes transaction fees and all of those things. So eventually you find you borrowed 25, but out of the 25,000, maybe I'm talking about my initial life, you find out that this 25 has trickled down maybe to around 23 or 22 there. If you borrow 100,000, maybe like today, you'll probably be required to borrow like 113 or 15,000 shillings on top, so that a principal amount will be regarded as 100,000 for that matter. So gradually, a loan will make you move or scale up, but it's an uphill task. I must say. And seemingly because it's an uphill task, not everyone who goes to for a long race is very certain about the way the body functions or the advent of the future. Everybody is very blind on what comes on table during that time you're borrowing. Remember, it's very rosy from both sides. And whoever gives the money sees the brighter side of you. Whoever receives the money sees a brighter future where you're able to do the repayment in batches as per the agreement.
Oh, okay.
But now, just before I forget this, there's a big lacuna that comes in place when situations as we have seen them, like the Gen Z situation, where maybe Linda knows that every day I have to collect around 10,000 shillings from my business, which 5 has to go to all the expenses about my shop. So if a day you did not work, you didn't get the 10,000. So the remittance by the end of the month will be consistent like you have been doing like in other times. And then most unfortunately is when we have other quarters, other lending quarters other than the banks, which in my own reference, for lack of a better word, I would say they are quite punitive. Especially when you have like those lenders always telling you that they have those reducing, what do you call them, sir? Reducing balances.
Reducing balance,
absolutely.
Variance, I don't know what you
that language, my
fixed
friend.
costs.
Absolutely. These are references that when you get to those borrowing, no one will tell you actually what they are. They are very sweet on one side, and they never tell you. Every woman in the kitchen wants a very sharp knife to ensure that you slice one of your items. But no one tells you that this knife can also slice your flesh.
George, you know, this is quite an interesting thing that he brings up, and perhaps they will be coming back to explain to us whether people are normally told what they're getting themselves into. At that point, you're excited, they have approved your loan. On the other side, they are excited that you're taking a loan and therefore they're going to make money out of it. I want this to go all the way to where you are before you loop in Brown. So you can check it out. It is punitive already even before you get to the reducing balance.
Let me have it.
Punitive as this is not even 100% profit. This is, I don't know what profit. You borrow 200,000 and then you pay 418.
Over what?
We're happy that at least this loan was cleared.
Yes.
And this is Willie Dennis's. So
Willie Dennis, you borrowed, this is to confirm that principal of 200,000, you have settled the loan with us after paying 418,000. So 218,000, 177,000 more. And you had handed over an asset, our caller.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your car. So you can see you handed over, they returned the logbook back to you.
Yes.
So had you failed to pay this, they would have sold your car at 200 at the balance.
No.
To recover.
It's worth over 1 million shillings.
But they would have sold it to recover that money.
Their money.
To recover their money, and the balance, no one knows what happens with it. Now, it is, that's why I was talking about it's quite an uphill task.
Okay.
When this...
And this is actually 2022.
Yes. It's about, it's
2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Exactly 2 years ago.
Exactly 2 years ago. So if that was happening today, I don't know what answers our panelists they are going to be giving towards this. Sorry for that.
Willie, I'm curious. Did you have a hard time paying this debt?
And did you ever default at any one point? Maybe a month comes and you have defaulted?
I don't know what word. Do you have a better word other than default for this matter, Linda?
Right.
Circumstances did not allow you to pay on time.
Kuna mahali ulishindwa na mzigo.
Inashinda namna hii kwa sababu if you look at it here, if Muyakane owes Linda some money and it is on Sunday and Linda is not able to transact that, seemingly because the financial institutions do not work on Sunday. This you have to do on Monday.
So you skip by a day, say?
Yes, automatically. And some of these financial institutions have a system that works just like a clock.
Automatic.
It is 9:59, automatically it's 11 p.m. It is 11:59, automatically is Wednesday. Things just pop out. If you are supposed to pay, maybe you have a balance of 100,000, and then apparently you find out that you wanted to pay 20 to have a balance of 80, and then an instance happens like that. Maybe this guy owed me some money. He says he was not able to do that today. He will do that tomorrow. I relied on what he has to give me so that I can do my remittances. His failure directly affects me. And the other side of the lender does not even want to listen. That is on the issues you're talking about, reducing balances. So automatically, as the clock tickles, things change. So if I had paid 20 and had a balance of 80, it is equals as if I did not even do a remittance for that month.
Okay.
Because the money just returns to 100 automatically. As a fine, I don't know what it is. Maybe they will be in a position to explain
that.
By the time I am getting this money to add to the 80 so that I have a balance of 60, actually now I'm finding I have 100 to push to 80. It actually discourages you.
Thank you, Dennis. Let's bring in Brown. I mean, umekuwa kwa hii sector ya transport, and we've also seen, for instance, the boda sector specifically. There is quite a niche that comes in terms of, there is a loan you're supposed to, kuna watu wanakuja na loan, wanakwambia they can give you this at, a motorbike at this amount, but then you realize the repayment period, say the repayment amount daily or monthly is way higher than you'd have imagined. So you end up just running around the motorcycle, and you're pretty much not making money, or you're making to refund them before you even start making your own profit. How has it been for you?
Thank you for the question. And I've been working in a transport sector for a long time. I started from a motorbike. Now I can say that I'm a CEO.
Yes,
working with my company also. So what I can say, thank you, what I can say on a transport sector, daily to day, we live with borrowing. Every time we borrow. For instance, you have said something about motorbikes. Motorbike, we have different types of company with the different policies. So we can find, for example, I don't want to mention, but we have severally. Even you know yourself, we have several. Some people can come with a sweet language. They said that deposit 10,000, you get a motorbike. Then, duration, you will pay with, they don't say years, they come with months. You pay for 18 months. So daily, you pay something like 700. If you calculate 18 months or 36 months, you find maybe you are paying for 3 motorbikes. And because those companies have studied well, and they have all feedback about riders and other sectors where they used to loan, they have discovered that most Kenyans, according to economy, we are desperate. The cost of living is high. We need to take our kids to school. We need to feed our families. So they have discovered that we are desperate. Even if they come with harsh policy, we need just to agree so that we can work and take something at home. So how can you do? You just accept and find yourself inside doing that without knowing. My friend has said something about Kenyans need to plan. When borrowing, you need to plan. My friend, let me tell you something. According to the economy we are living now, you don't need to plan.
You don't plan.
Let me ask you a question. Like today, I was coming here at TV47 from my house at around 4 p.m. At the village market, my bearing was almost getting out of the tire. So I need to look for a mechanic to fix. I had no money in my pocket. I called my mechanic from Kirinyaga Road. He came and he told me, I can get a bearing with 3,500. Then fixing, you will give me a fuel to go and buy, then I come back. Give me fuel. Then the cost of that spare part with the labor, it came up to like 5,000. I had no money in my pocket. I went to mobile loaning with Unitas. I applied a loan because I wanted to continue with my journey to be here. Then I borrowed. We have other issues like you want to take your kid to school, you have borrowed money for business. Then you don't have a school fees. Maybe you had applied some money at your job, but the boss has said, I'm not giving out money for school fees. You will use the money you have borrowed for business. So today's economy, you don't plan, my friend. Our problems are bigger than what we earn. It is very difficult to plan on what you have borrowed for you to succeed in business. We have what we call people are depending on us. Your mother can be at home. She is very sick. You need to take her to the hospital. As you know, most people living at Ushago, they don't have that platform or strategy where that they can be enrolled on NHIF. Even if you pay them direct, you can go to home, then they say, we will get you some medicine here, the other one you will buy from outside. Corruption has affected our country, not only in Kenya, globally. It is very difficult to handle that issue. So what I can say, those companies have discovered that Kenyans, we are different. We are looking on how we can survive. We are looking, I have like 10,000 shillings. I need a motorbike. That is the only way. Maybe I have been working in a security private from company.
Or you've managed to borrow from family members.
That's it. Okay. Then I want to change maybe working environment. I want to work in border sector whereby I can have freedom even to be with my family. Anytime I want, I go to visit my family. So I can go to Saribe. I tell Saribe, you have a good deal. I have 10,000, let me deposit, you give me a motorbike. They process it very fast, so that you can start paying. By the time you come up in a difficulty, you don't pay, they just give you 2 days. Maybe you deposited after, and you are paid, you said remittance, daily remittance, for like 1 year. Then you failed to pay 2 days. Their prayer is not for you to clear the loan. Their prayer is
you default.
You default so that they can come for it to lend for another guy. So we are also appealing to the government or the CRB people to give us a clear solution whereby I have different problem I need to solve. If they can even accept my statement about what I'm going through, because I can maybe be defaulting because I'm servicing another loan somewhere, or I'm servicing my kid is in hospital or my mother is in hospital. If I came to the company, then I explained myself. Things will be better if they say, how will you make it to continue paying the debt? I explain to themselves. But nowadays, those company doesn't care. If you default tomorrow, they have what we call a tracking system. You are at Kiambu Road. You go to Kiambu Road near petrol station, you find someone. Will you take me to Kiambu town? Yes. At the moment he's taking the key, someone is holding your hand, get out of the motorbike, they take the motorbike. Then you remain, you remain there with your problems. So, because of the difficult economy we are going through as Kenyans, we are facing a lot of frustration in a transport sector. I'll relate also the case of a motorbike with a vehicle. Nowadays, the police even doesn't look on a vehicle, the appearance of the body. The first thing to look, tire. Tire only. They say, put it aside. Even they don't give you a receipt to go to the court. No. Your tires need to be replaced. We need 5,000 to release that matatu or that taxi. We need 5,000. And you don't have that money. Maybe it is the first request in the morning. Where will you get that money? You need to borrow. So if you say that you need to plan on what to do before you borrow, how will you handle this issue? Life need to continue. At lunchtime, your wife is calling you. Kids want something in the school. Chioni, they are also calling you. And if you leave your home, you are going to work, they don't know if you are facing a lot of problems. They don't know. They know that daddy is out to look for money on how we can get our daily bread. So if you say that I had a lot of problems, We don't know. You are going to look for women, so we don't know it. So you just
find a way.
Yeah, that's how we survive now. So it is very difficult, my friend, to plan on what you have borrowed now. We used to plan it on Kibaki's time. Somehow for the last Uhuru's 5 years we used to plan. But for now, it is very difficult for a person to plan on what he has borrowed.
I think it comes back here.
Linda, just to give an interjection on what you said, it is just things that are popping up. Yeah, very quickly. On issues like what he's talking about car tracks. You see, on like vehicles and motorbikes, you have to have car tracks. And sometimes you wanted 100,000, but you are also supposed to purchase at your expense the car tracking system. Nonetheless, that you maybe have more than one in your own vehicle, but they want to add their own in addition to what you have for their own trackings. And when you ask them if they could be comfortable just dwelling on the prevailing ones, the ones that are already installed, they would insist that you still have their own. And this is just an additional amount which is just uncalled for. Because in essence, okay, they have that processing fee and all of that. But now, like he has just alluded to that you need to have a tracking system, but that is an additional money that you did not even require. So you end up borrowing in excesses of more than what you want. They have to make their money, you have to make your money, you have to prepare a loan. Thank you. That's what I want.
All right, interesting. We had some questions to respond to, George?
Yes. I think the caller first. You can handle the question from the caller.
Yeah, the caller from Mombasa wanted to know, for example, if you have borrowed money and you used a collateral to access that credit and you have defaulted, after paying some amount, he used an example like you borrow 12 million, you pay 2 million, and then you have some balance of 10 million left. Then you had put in there your collateral, maybe 15 million. And then when now the collateral is auctioned at 13 million, I was asking what happens? Will they just, the lender, take the balance that was left and give you the excess? So what happened is, yes, they will want to recover the loan balance. But again, you know, when it reaches a point when now the lender is coming to recover the loan you have defaulted, there are other additional costs that you'll have to bear. For example, there are court papers, because now they're coming to take your car or your land or your property. They also have to be aligned to the law. They have to get auctioneers. They have to value that property. So all those costs are given to the borrower. So you may find that you had a loan of 10 million and they sold your property worth 15 million. So after recovering the 10 million, there are those additional costs which the bank or the lender, microfinance, incurred because you defaulted. So all those will be loaded onto you. And because they are also wanting to maximize their margin, you may find that very little gets back to you. That whole amount might be all spent in recovering of your loan.
Hence the question, why is it that all this information is not disclosed to a borrower at the point of borrowing? Because then you'll be told perhaps in this years you'll have paid this and this and this amount. Some of these things you come to learn about as you proceed.
When they come for you.
You know, I think there's a spirit that gets into people with
so sometimes you're being told that
it is in the footnotes.
It has been approved. That's all that matters.
Yeah. So people think like this is a favor that this bank or this lender is extending to me by giving me credit. And you find that the person borrowing the money does not make a lot of inquiries to get all the information pertaining the loan. Like I was looking at this one. How do you pay all this interest? How
this one?
Yes, you borrow 200, you pay over 400. Where will you invest this money that it will grow and give you additional 200
in just a year
and retain some profit, because you borrow the money to benefit you as well. So if you borrowing, you must have all this information. It must be disclosed to you in a very comprehensive manner. And you have to see the end at the start. that I'm going to pay this loan for 36 months. After cumulatively this 200,000, it will be this much. You have to get that money at the start.
Let us agree that we're dealing with a population that is not as balanced, illiterate, literate, and all that. And all these people have to access the money. So is it for the bank to walk you through all these processes, or is it for you to do due diligence? Okay, not necessarily due diligence, but for you to do your assignment, research, and understand some of these things. Because then I'm imagining of my mother, who still is actively, contributing to a SACCO and is actively borrowing money, perhaps not so keen about some of these things. Who is to walk her through? Is it for her to ask all those questions? Allow us to take a short break, and then we come back.
And as we go,
yes.
This John Ogalo is supporting the sentiments from our friend here. He says, John Ogalo, then now watu wa kukopa motorbike ni waezi, and the government must come out clear to save Kenyans who are suffering. This has become a norm. Hadi siku hizi these companies must be investigated with the Gava. Kenya wanaumia na hawataki kutoa sauti zao wasaidiwe.
Well said.
Absolutely, and that's where we take a short break. Keep your feedback coming. We can see more questions coming in. Please go ahead and channel your questions to the panelists tonight, even as you look at the debt conversation in the country.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
The banks are using this as excuse to do business with the government. Economy won't grow if the money circulation in the market is less, as government is investing in long-term projects that don't yield results now. We must have a balance between long-term and medium and short-term projects. Your response to the many questions that have been leveled against CRB in this case?
It's a very sensitive area.
Yeah.
But I need to explain a concept here between credit, debt, and the CRB. There are institutions out there whose business is to extend credit by way of lending. So lenders would include banks, microfinance institutions, SACCOs, and even what you call peer-to-peer lending, where you lend a friend money on terms that you agree. Now, every lender at the back of their mind, tries to answer three questions. One is that if I lend out money to this borrower, will they pay me back at all? Because if they don't pay, I lose my principal. The second question is that will they pay me on time? Because that is a liquidity issue. I need to have money to keep running the business. So I need that money to come in on time. That's the second question. And the third question is, will I make money? Will I make a profit? Because that's the reason I am taking the risk to lend money to this borrower. Those questions are always at the back of the lender. Now, how lenders answer those questions? Some of them would want to protect themselves and take collateral. Some of them would try to use information to try and reduce the risk of defaulting. Now, when they are processing the credit or the loan to you, it is a credit transaction. But once you take up the loan, for you it becomes debt. Because then now you owe, there is a claim on you, you have a financial obligation. So you are carrying a debt. Now, the way the CRB comes in is to record what has happened. This lender has appraised your application, they have given you money on these terms that you're supposed to repay. So the CRB becomes the depository of the transaction on how it happens. When did you apply for the loan? How much were you given? What were the terms of repayment? Can we have a centralized place where that information is collected? So that information goes into a CRB profile. And that's how credit information sharing came into place to be. Because when that information is centralized, every lender is depositing in that central database, so it becomes visible on how you are borrowing. And as I said earlier, that because lenders want to recover their money, there are certain things that borrowers don't know. For example, if you agree with a lender that they will lend to you at 14%, that means you are on 30 days installment. That means they are assuming you will pay on time. And you will pay the number of installments you have agreed. There will be no delay even one day. And that you will pay the interest that has agreed. That's the assumption. But how do they make money? They will program it in such a way that if you delay by one day, the interest rate to be charged is not what you agreed. It is now a different rate that will apply. And generally, you will find that most people, very few people, probably about 20-30%, will actually pay on the debt that they agreed that they will pay. The rest of the people, another probably 40-50%, struggle to pay. Yes, you are not defaulting, you are not running away, but you are struggling to pay. During that time when you are struggling to pay, your interest rate changes. And that would explain to you, to say, in this economy, why is it that lenders or banks report such high profits when their customers are actually dying? It is because that the lending contracts tend to move away from the agreed amount into the penalty areas.
Worst case scenario, to what extreme can this go? That one is going to pay, double the amount, triple the amount, and as well as you react to this.
Yes. So for a long time, one would pay, lenders would charge you any amount until you pay that debt. So you'd find somebody who borrowed 100,000 in 5 years, the bank is claiming $1 million. Yeah? And so many people really suffered. They couldn't pay that. But a rule was introduced in this country called the in duplum rule. And that rule says that you can no longer, a lender can no longer recover more than twice what they lent to you. So if you borrowed 100,000, you cannot pay more than 200,000 on that particular loan. If there's anything above 200,000, actually you can go to court and recover that money.
Okay.
That is the rule today.
In excesses of what is...
Yes.
Yes. Looks like you have some good news here, brother.
Yes.
Not interested.
Behind me. The spree.
I have two questions.
Yes.
And one involves what Madam Lynette here has said. Are financial institutions like that, SACCOs or self-help groups like that, the solution for people who are looking to get cheap credit, and what are the risks therein for them? And consider also that I don't think Shomungo Association sends people to the CRB. Do you check people's CRB before they borrow?
We're not sending people to CRB.
So if someone borrows and defaults, then you have
what happens?
Do you look for them in traditional means, or what's the way? You will answer that in a bit. But Mr. Mukoko, as you talk to us about that, also tell us, this government actually vied for power on, among many other things, a very emotive subject. Waliambia wananchi kwamba tutawatoa CRB, ile listing ya CRB ambayo inakuzuia kupata mkopo, tutahakikisha wote mmetoka kwenye CRB. Talk to us about how that may have affected how people see CRBs, and what sort of impact that idea or that messaging has had on how people are borrowing today.
Thank you for that question. I think it's a very emotive issue there. And like I explained, how the CRB came into being in this country, it was designed, first of all, to remove the serial defaulter. And so people got into the CRB because you are a defaulter, and they call it a blacklist. But we have seen the progress that has come. But lenders continue to use the CRB as a check on default. So that even if you have been paying and the lender goes there and finds you have some default somewhere, they want to use that as a basis of denying you credit. And therefore, as much as the CRB has moved and become a source of credit history, which is your information capital, lenders tend to look for the bad thing in your credit history. And that is why, at the time of campaigns, close to about 5 million Kenyans were in default status. And because lenders are in the situation whereby they're saying, if you have any default item, we'll not lend to you until you pay. So most people got locked out of accessing further credit. But I have seen practices are different. When you pay back, there are lenders who will reinstate your credit immediately. Others may give you a period of, say, about 3 months to see how you will behave. Others may give you a longer period of about 6 months. But the whole point was that when this new administration came into office, they did something good. They say, fine, we know that Kenyans have a problem, they are not able to pay their loans. So let's take all Kenyans who are owing up to 5 million. Banks should agree to cut that 5 million into half by 50%. They call it a haircut. So do a haircut of 50%. So you remain with 2.5. Now, this 2.5, two things should happen. The bank should set an amendment to the CRB to reset the account to look normal. And then you start paying. And they were given up to 31st of May. So if you now continue paying the half of what you had, that's 2.5, you now will not be denied credit. The additional thing the government did was to say, let us set up a different fund that is not in the Credit Reference Bureau system. That's the Hustler Fund. So the Hustler Fund is a silo. If you are borrowing from the Hustler Fund, that information doesn't go to CRB. So it just stays within the silo. So they started and say, we'll give you 500. If you pay back, we'll give you 1,000. So we'll keep building your credit like that. But internally, they still applied the same rule, that if you took the first 500, when you come for the next 500, you can't get. You cannot get. And as we speak today, the default rates in that fund
are quite serious.
Are in excess of 70%.
Yeah.
Which means sustaining the fund is going to be a really challenge.
Yeah.
But what we are telling government and any other entity, even like your group, yeah. Today, what is important is your credit history. So if you have a member who has borrowed from a bank and they are repaying, they are building their credit history, they have also borrowed from your organization and they are paying well, that history is so important if it came here because it would boost their credit score. They will get more money at a cheaper price. But when that history is outside of the Credit Reference Bureau, then they can only benefit at your level. So the narrative now is to say, how can we help Kenyans build their credit history in a centralized system where everybody can be able to access, so that access is never an issue, pricing becomes more and more favorable. In developed countries, interest rates don't go beyond 4%. Yeah, they don't go beyond 4%. Here we are talking about over 20%.
30% for Shylocks.
Yes. Even much more. Shylocks go even up to about...
there are no rules and regulations for them?
Yeah. They will even tell you,
the
come and park your car here, you take the money, and I'll charge you 10% per day or per week, whatever it is. So you find that the cost of credit in this country is going to get to a point where we use people's credit history to price this money. Then over time, it is going to become cheaper and cheaper to borrow. So the government initiative to enable people access credit through the Hustler Fund is a good idea, but it's not sustainable the way it is being done today.
All right.
Yes.
I want you, Mr. Nyange, I want you to jump in here. And as you do that, organizations such as the one for Madam Lynette here, how can they be protected from losing their money if they lend to somebody who decides to default or does not have the capacity to pay and does not have the benefit of a credit history, like Mr. Mukoko is saying, to be able to help the lenders know how much to give this person, at what rate, and whether or not they're going to repay? How can organizations like this be protected? A lot of people have lost money that way.
And I think Madam Lynette explained how they cover themselves against that risk. See now, first of all, this family.
It's family. So just family members. Hakuna outsider.
Outsider wanaweza ingia, lakini as long as ufuate masharti hatuna shida.
Na masharti labda kidogo, just before you answer, what masharti ni kama nini haswa?
One, ukuwe faithful. Alafu ukishakuwa faithful, ukitaka kuingia kwa hii group.
Kwa contribution
kwa yes, kwa contribution, and then kuregister. First una register na 500 to be a member. Ukishakuwa member, and then utaanza kufuata vile tunafanya. Sasa ukifika mahali useme unataka kufanya kitu kama biashara. Sasa tumesha kusoma, tumejua wewe ni mwaminifu. Tukikupa pesa hautapotea. Na hizo pesa utarudisha na hiyo interest.
Just how much do they borrow to survive? Wacha niulize.
Like 5,000.
So most of the times, like, I mean, is it so common for them to borrow to survive? Ama mostly they will come to borrow for business?
Business. Si kusurvive. Sababu kusurvive unajua kulipa itakuwa ngumu sana.
Amkubali mtu kuchukua pesa kwa kufanyia kitu tofauti na biashara. So mnajua aje kwamba hii pesa ni ya biashara?
As long as wewe mwenyewe tumejua unataka kufanya biashara.
So mnaendanga
yes.
Mnaendanga
unafuatilia hiyo biashara.
Unasema unaenda unafuatilia mtu, unataka ujue mtu anataka kuweka biashara gani. At least hizo pesa zitarudi aje. Juu nikikupa pesa na sijajua unataka kufanyia nini, si utapotea. Nikijua mahali unaenda kuweka biashara itakuwa ni better. At least nitakupa pesa, najua utakuwa unaleta interest. And then ukiwa umepata zote unafanya nini? Unarudisha. Hapo hata una uwezekano sasa kukopa hata 10,000. Cause hii 5 ulipewa, hii 5 umeenda umetumia umeirudisha. Sasa utaongezewa 10, at least capital yako nayo iongezeke.
Percentage yenu ni ngapi? 1
kidogo.
3%.
Nina swali. So mtu akikosa kulipa huwa mnafanya namna gani?
Sasa mtu akikosa kulipa, si umekuja umeongea na mtu mwenye umeongea naye, like umepitia kwangu. So umepitia, yeah. Venye umepitia kwangu, mimi nitahandwa na chama.
Wewe sasa ni guarantor?
Yes. Sasa nikishahandwa na chama, juu hiyo ni pesa yao. Nitalipa hiyo pesa. Nikishalipa, mimi nitabaki na pambana na wewe.
But also, mtu anaweza kuchukua more than what it is that they have in terms of savings.
Yes.
Mtu anaweza kuchukua hata kama uko na savings ya 5,000 unaweza chukua as much as 3 times.
Yes. Okay. As long as unalipa. Kulipa tu ndio kitu ya muhimu. Lakini hautapelekwa CRB. Hiyo ni ile
nyinyi mko na CRB yenu. Yenu internal.
Yeah, so you see, that way they mitigate against such kind of things. But I think what they can do, and this applies to also a number like Brown there, that people need proper education about money. That as even you bring members into that group, people need to learn about money. And this is what I've come to realize in my career and my life as a researcher. There is a big gap that exists between knowledge about the money. People grow in family homes, in schools, where they work in social groups, and rarely will you find people teaching and learning and discussing about money, about how to budget, about how to save, about how to invest, about where to get the money, what kind of questions you need to ask. So you find that one party, like now the lender, has more information about you and you have very little information, what you call information asymmetry. So they will load all these requirements onto you, which you don't have. And then when the time comes for you to repay your loan, you realize that the things you signed for, you find a document is 10 pages and you're only shown a place where you are required to append your signature. So you sign, you go to the final one, you sign. Then after finishing to sign, you find money in your bank account. Then you smile, you are happy. Unasema, wacha nirudishie mwili pole kwanza. So someone will go, relax, and share with the friends moja mbili like that. Ama mama ataenda nunue nyama samaki apeleke nyumbani kwanza the first 2 weeks ni kutoa jasho. Then you realize the month has come to an end, you need to repay. So how do we learn education about money? The principles have to hold. The loan is for investment. If you're borrowing money and this money you're not investing it, I can assure you that you end up in that debt trap. It will be a cycle. You can never break out because you are not making more money. You have to borrow in a such way. You are borrowing this money, you go and invest it. It has to give you more money than you borrowed. So how do you do this? You make sure that you learn how to do the budget. By starting to do the budget, you start from the income that you have. So I have 2,000 shillings. This is the money, my money, which I have not borrowed.
Looking at you, telling you the math does not math.
I'm telling you, that is the principle. If the principle doesn't hold, we cannot sit here. If the gravity does not hold us, we will go to the moon.
Okay.
So you start, this is my money, which I have not borrowed. How much can I buy with my money? So you work backwards. Then you find the gap. So you make sure you limit yourself that from my own money, I can be able to meet my living expenses. Then if I want to do business, if I want to, that vehicle, if you are using it to generate income, then you can borrow the money to put into it. But if that vehicle is not going to generate income, if you put money there, make sure you have lent it that money. You have to find a way of recovering that money as soon as possible, without which you will find yourself in that cycle and you will not break out. So you balance, you work backwards. Then you teach even your children from the earliest age that how do we manage our money? How do we invest? Where do we invest? How much is the return on investment? So you have to balance cost of credit and return on investment. You borrow at 20%. Where you are going to put it, how much is it going to give you? It should not give you less than 20%. It should give you like 27%. That's why you see government is lending at 17%. So if government is lending at 17%, that is risk-free. you should not, nobody else should borrow below that rate. And if the government is giving us 17%, so you must be able to get like 25% plus inflation. Inflation is how you will calculate that. 17%, that's risk-free, then plus inflation, 8%, 25. Because inflation will eat your money. If you have anywhere that is not giving you a return that is more than 25%, don't put there borrowed money. It will not give you any return.
All right. Now, this conversation is bigger than the time that we have. I want to give 3 people a chance to give a parting shot to Kenyans, a sentence or 2 that will be able to help Kenyans. We can start with our dear lady. Kama una neno moja ungependa kusema kwa Kenya kuhusu swala la kuomba mikopo na kulipa. One thing, Willie Dennis, I want you to give us one lesson, quick one, from what you learned with your experience, ile kinyozi umepitia. Brown, give us one point, just one, very, very short, one sentence, what you learned from this so that Kenyans can learn. Then Mr. Mukoko, you can close with us for a takeaway. Madam Linet, tafadhali.
Asante.
Yes.
Kitu ningependa kuambia Wakenya ni ukuwe na ile bidii ya kusema ya kwamba nimekopa, lazima nilipe. Na ukijua kwamba utakopa na hautaweza kulipa, wacha kukopa. Kwa sababu hiyo itakupea burden na utajipata uko mgonjwa, umedevelop pressure, ujipata uko mgonjwa kabisa. So ni ile maisha ni ngumu, tunangangana, lazima tungangane kwa sababu ya jamii zetu. Lakini ni ile ukope na uwe na ile bidii ya kulipa.
All right. Asante sana. Willie Dennis.
Naam, Wakenya wenzangu, ikiwa utaweza kukopa, lipa. Lakini kabla haujakopa, ensure that those pages you flip very fast, sign hapa, sign hapa. Take your time to sign hapa what is above that sheet before you just come down to a very lucrative signing na kuchukua pesa. Because it may land you in troubles that perhaps you may not be able to take yourself from. They said, debt trap.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Shalu.
Yes, my fellow Kenyans, what I can tell you is that you cannot have exact budget with a corrupt country. But what you can do is just to be a discipline with money. While in a group like Shumongo, like Linet here, just be disciplined with money, borrow so that you can score. You're borrowing credit for you to borrow again tomorrow. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Mukoko. Oh, Mr. Nyange, then Mr. Mukoko.
Okay.
One final takeaway.
Teach your children about money. Discuss with your spouse, with your friend, about how to budget, about how to save, about how to borrow. If that document is big enough, carry it home. Tell them, let me go with it at home. I studied and I'll come tomorrow and sign. Go get someone, your son, your friend, to help you and make sense of the requirements in that document.
All right. Thank you, sir.
What I can say to Kenyans is that the information that is now in the Credit Reference Bureau is an asset to you. It's an asset because that information enables you to open the doors to access credit. And today, Kenyans, over 90% of Kenyans can access credit through their mobile phone. It works because of the information available in the Credit Reference Bureau. That information is now being used by lenders to price how much you pay in interest rate. So what I can say is that we need to move away from the notion that a CRB is a bad thing. A CRB is keeping an important asset that is going to be useful to you for the rest of your life as long as you are taking any loan in this country. So be friendly, understand the information value that is kept in the CRB profile. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen at home, I hope you've learned something tonight. I hope the experiences of our guests and the insights of our guests have been of assistance to you. Do we have any feedback?
Yes, you actually caught me going through some of it on X as well. But our SMS line is where things have gotten heated. Ndulu from Luanda, Vihiga County says, ukikopa pikipiki kama uko karibu kumaliza unanyang'anywa hata unauawa. Pia wanaokopa vitu vya kupanda kama mbegu, mbolea etc. wananyang'anywa mali yao. Interest iko juu sana. Saidieni wananchi wanaumia, hawana mtetezi. James says most banks tend to have a fixed base lending rate regardless of customers' credit score. So positive use of CRB remains theoretical. That's what we have on our WhatsApp, our SMS line. A lot has also come in on X as well, formerly Twitter, where I've been trying to retrieve it, but perhaps towards the end I'll be able to get it for you, Victor.
All right. Now, we want to say this conversation and others happen every Tuesday. So tune in every Tuesday. Send in your feedback. Our SMS line is always on the screen. Our WhatsApp number is always on the screen on occasion. Let us know what you think. Let us know your views and reviews. Talk to us. Talk to us even about what sort of topics you'd like us to cover. This was a recommendation from some of you that we need to talk about debt. We brought Mr. Sam Omukoko, who is a founder and group managing director of Metropole, which is a credit reference bureau itself. Thank you so much for coming. Tonight, we also brought you Mr. JJ Nyangi, who is a key player in the financial institution, in the financial sector. Karibu sana. Over there we had Madam Lynette, who is the spokesperson of a very serious group called the Shomungo Group. What does Shomungo mean? Quick one. Chanyumbani, all right. Charity begins at home, clearly. Karibu sana, Madam Lynette.
Asante.
We had Willie Dennis Njiru, who is a journalist with TV47, based in Naivasha. Yes. Usually he's behind the camera and sometimes in front of it. Today, the tables have turned. And finally, but not least, we have Mr. Brown Shalwa, a key player in the transport industry. Karibu sana. Asante. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. My name is Victor Moyakane. Good night and God bless you.
All right, and my name is Linda Alela. Subject that brought us here is the question, just why is it that Kenyans have resorted to borrowing so much so for survival? I do not know whether we've gotten answers, but of course, as the specialist would remind you, it's important to plan before you get into that debt. But of importance, have that knowledge because it will save you a great deal. You mustn't pay extra, for something that you can easily get for such a few amount, if you'd want to call that. So my name is Linda Lela. Once again, I throw it over to you, George Maringa.
And indeed, we trust that you've learned a thing or two and also gotten inspired. And for these conversations that don't end here, of course, they proceed online. Use our handles that we informed you about earlier on. I am George Maringa.